Alrighty, so today we are going to talk about the last team in the season preview that is the Eastern Conference. Yes, this is the penultimate episode of the season preview, and I'm still trying to hope that I can finish the last episode of the season preview, talk about the Vancouver Whitecaps later tonight, though most likely it's going to be relatively late because I do have to do a little bit of a ground hop after this episode is over, talk about Toronto FC in the season preview series. But nevertheless, as I said, this is the last Eastern Conference team I'm going to talk about in this season preview series. And there's no doubt that, of all the teams that heading into this season that pretty much have almost no chance to make it to the playoffs, that of course is Toronto FC. And I think even TFC fans can realize that that is the case because as we talk about with this team is in a deep rebuild right now. And last season, after they definitely showed some progress in terms of the deep rebuild, yes, I know TFC fans were very frustrated that they missed out on the playoffs and just the incredible run that John Herman has did to this team when it comes to really kind of make them punching above their weight and still somehow competing for playoffs despite the fact that there was a warning sign that they were clearly punching above their weight. It was still some progress when it comes to seeing in the deep rebuild that they go through and the cleanup of the mess that was left in the previous regime. And then John Herman basically said he had to step down because of the drone spying scandal that involved the Canadian Soccer Association. And it just feels like they're kind of back in square one. And not to mention the other big problem for this TFC side is that they still have not figured out the situation with those two Italians, and that to this day it's hard to believe that those two Italians are still on the roster, even though they probably should have got rid of them or even exercised a buyout on one of them a long time ago. But that being said, last season they finished 11 with an 11-4-19 record and finished with 37 points. Obviously, they did not make it to the playoffs, and it's been a while since TFC had made it to the playoffs. 2020 was the last time they made it to the playoffs. I believe that's second longest in terms of the active streak in terms of not making the playoffs. Only the Chicago Fire has a longest active playoff drought right now. And the last playoff series wins was back in 2019 when they made it all the way to MLS Cup and was part of that trilogy of MLS Cup that we seen between the Seattle Sounder and Toronto FC. Obviously, unfortunately, TFC didn't not win the trilogy of that, and that Seattle kind of got revenge over TFC in terms of the second part of the trilogy of MLS Cup between the Sounders and this TFC side when Toronto was able to win that second MLS Cup out of the trilogy. The head coach, of course, is Robin Fraser, so he finally found a job. Although I didn't expect that, after he was fired from Colorado Rapids, I was expecting he was going to get a position relatively quick, and it definitely took a little longer than expected. But I wasn't expecting him returning to a place that he is well known with Toronto FC, and there's no doubt that if his job in terms of trying to make Colorado relevant and make them a playoff team during his year when he stepped in to the Rapids was going to be tough enough. Wait till he has to take over this team, and that again, this team is just so disarray right now when it comes to the roster, and you could maybe argue this team probably has the weakest roster out of any team in MLS, and it's gonna take a lot for him. It's gonna take something similar to what John Herman did last season, where again last season I really think that team was really punching above the weight considered the talent wise, and Robin Fraser is gonna hope that he can replicate that. The general manager, of course, is Jason Hernandez. He's been here since 2023, and there's been a big change of regime when it comes to this TFC front office, and understandably they had to do it. Consider the old regime clearly has set this team back in years with all these bad contract and all these reckless spending that just kind of blow up their face time in and time out, and that now they're basically beginning this deep rebuild. And again, Jason Hernandez is definitely in the center, along with some of these new high rank front office member of this TFC side that is hoping to form an identity once again with this team and just trying to clean up the huge mess that the previous regime left in this team. Now, looking at some of the transfer that they made so far in the offseason. So again, this team, when you have a team that is clearly in a deep rebuild, you would expect maybe they would make some more signings, but I can understand why they decide not to, considering that again, they still have some bad contract that they need to get out of their book, and once those bad contract is out of the way, then they can definitely start to become ambitious again and hope that they actually sign the right player it is. And I also think that the lack of signing maybe just they want to be more careful when it comes to the signings and especially the scouts that they send to potentially bring in those players. They're maybe spending a little longer to see which player might fits this team rather than just kind of recklessly spend money on players that maybe are unproven and think that it turns out to fit well for their team and it just doesn't work what whatsoever. But in terms of the transfer that they made, one of them that they made, it's not even on this team anymore. Thiago Andrade, of course, he was part of a trade from San Diego FC. San Diego actually picked Thiago Andrade in the expansion draft, but then he quickly traded to TFC. I thought he was going to maybe have a revitalized kind of year with TFC, and especially TFC is putting a lot of reclamation project when it comes to their roster. I thought he was going to maybe have that kind of season for this team, but as we'll talk about, yeah, that's not going to happen. It looks like he's going to go back to Asia. Then they of course signed Tio Berno, a loan from Granada, and then they also signed one of their homegrown in Adisi the Rosario. And again, homegrown is something that I really think that if this team is going to try to form an identity and trying to get back to relevance, they really need to pay more attention to their homegrown and especially their academy. And as I'll mention in a bit, it is shocking the fact that how this team has neglected the homegrown talent within their area, because when you look at the Toronto area and you look at all the players that play for the Canadian national team, pretty much almost all of them hail from the Toronto area. But the other signings that they made, and this actually just happened recently today by signing Ola Bernhard Nelson, a loan from FC Midtjylland, and I'll talk a little bit more about that signing when I do the news of the week episode. Well, actually, I'll probably mention it now a little bit. He is a attacking player, and that he might be a starter for this team. I think he plays for the number 9 position as well. And again, this might be is the beginning of them trying to be a little bit more ambitious, especially from what I heard. He tends to do well when it comes to playing for a team that is participating in the Europa League and have scored a bunch of goals in with the team and even in the Europa League as well. So there's a step in the right direction. The fact that it seems like TFC have scouted the player they feel could be their next Josie Altidore, and we'll see whether or not if he is that kind of player. I mean, it's gonna take a lot to find a guy that is kind of the next Josie Altidore for this TFC side. Now, looking at players that's no longer on this team, so they shared off some bad contract and some pieces that clearly is not going to be part of the future as well this offseason. That was kind of one of the things I mentioned in last season with this TFC side. They had to maybe wait until this offseason to shred off more bad contract, and these are kind of the latest one with Emmy and Baki or Emmy and Beacon, Shane O'Neill, Greg Richardson, Brendan Cervania, Prince Owusu, Luke Singh, all those players have their option declined. And then, as I mentioned about Thiago Andrade, he's going to go back to Asia, this time in the J League as he's transferred to Cerezo Osaka, that is. Look at the first 5 games for this TFC side. So they start the season by playing against DC United on the road. And by the way, let me also just charge my laptop right here because I just got a warning that my laptop is running out of battery. Yeah, the first 5 games they start the season by going on the road to play against DC. Then they go on the road to play against Orlando City, and then they go on the road to play against FC Cincinnati. So they have a pretty road heavy start to the season. I mean, not a big surprise considering I'm pretty sure it's still relatively too cold to play in Toronto early in the season. But their first home game is going to be playing against the Chicago Fire, and then they go on the road to play against the New York Red Bulls. Now, last season, TFC was pretty good when it comes to coming out of the stretch, and that John Herman really made the team believe. And maybe part of that is because of the new head coach boost that they receive, and you wonder it could be the same thing with Robin Fraser as well, because when you look at some of the teams that they're going to be faced, I mean, there are some tough teams out there, but won't be surprised in these first five game stretch where they could get themselves a couple wins on the table as well. But looking at the last 5 games of the season, they go on the road to play against New England before going on the road to play against Columbus. Then they also have the Messi and friends home game against Inter Miami on September 27th before they go on the road again to play against Chicago. And then for the final game of the season, they finish the season at home against Orlando City. And notice I said they finished this season against Orlando City and not just the regular season and also on decision day. Many people don't believe this team is going to make it to the playoffs. And again, it's going to be, if this team does make it to the playoffs, it might be one of the biggest surprise we have ever seen in MLS history. And I know MLS has always provided some really big surprises out there, but when you look at this roster, and unless if they can continue to add to this roster and maybe even some surprises that can come out of nowhere, out of all these misfits and all these reclamation project kind of players on their roster. Yeah, it doesn't seem like this team is going to be anywhere close to being a playoff team. Now, look at the strength of this team. This is where it's tough because there, when you look at this roster, there really isn't any strength to the this roster. So I got to go a little deep, and I'll say the youth academy of this team, and I even put in quote or in parenthesis if they actually take it more seriously. Again, this team is located in an area that pretty much almost all of the players from the Canadian national team hail from the Toronto area. There's just so much talent in the Toronto area, and some of these players that come from that area, they actually join with other MLS team and join other academy and even leave the TFC academy and find some success. The fact that this academy has neglected those talent for this long a period is absolutely unacceptable, and it is kind of the reason why they're kind of at this point where they're heavily reliant on on signing foreign players or even players that are not homegrown players to hit well, and when it doesn't hit well, then yeah, you get what we see right now with their youth academy being one of the worst in the league, and the thing that they've been neglecting for over the year. That's going to be something that they're going to have to hope to not do, because again, this team with the area that they're in, they should be producing some really good players, and this should be one of the strongest academy based on the area that is, and they could also be a team that could be almost like a feeding team for the Canadian national team with just so much talent coming out of that area as well. And we'll see whether or not if they actually now take it more seriously and realize that, hey, we don't really need to just keep spending money and throwing money around on unproven players when we can clearly just invest in our academy and produce players that clearly is going to be ready to play in MLS and could have future with the Canadian national team as well. The biggest weakness of this team, I mean, I don't even need to mention. It's pretty much everything: the attack, the midfield, the defense. This is this is probably the weakest team in MLS heading into this season. There's just so much question with this team in terms of the roster that I can spend almost 30 minutes talking about. But for the sake of not going or rambling on that, it is pretty much everything. This team, as I said, is going to the once again the first stage of what should be a deep rebuild before they can get themselves back to playoff contention. I mean, I wasn't kidding when they say when I said about this team last season that with all the bad signings that they made, it really has set the team back years now. Well, now that is kind of the case, and now they're once again back in the first stage of this deep rebuild because of the way that they kind of screw up the well, actually I wouldn't say they screw up the John Herman situation. It wasn't really TFC fault that is the case. It's very unfortunate what happened in that situation, but it's a bitter pill to swallow, because I thought John Herman was really leading this team in the right direction. The free big question coming into this team. So obviously, the first big question is those two Italians. Will they actually exercise a buyout? It feels like it's long overdue, and especially with now the rule saying that you can have two buyouts, you gotta feel like they have to eventually buy out one of these two Italians. The one that I think they probably might do that, or they might even sell him to another team, which there's a reason why I think the reason why those two Italians are still there is because nobody wants to take that contract. Like no MLS team is going to take the Insigne contract. Remember how I said the Shaqiri contract might go down as the biggest bust and maybe the worst contract ever in league history. Yeah, I forgot about the Insigne contract as well. I mean, that contract is just as bad as the Shaqiri contract, if not worse, because the Shaqiri contract, yes, it was bad because of the 8 million that Chicago had to pay for him, and he wasn't really regularly playing for the team, and at times don't even really care about the team as well. Well, imagine trying to do that, have a player like that, and you have to pay him twice the salary that is, and that's exactly what they're paying Insigne. And I wouldn't be surprised right now that heading into this season, I mentioned the two Italians. I think Bernardeschi is probably still going to be on this team. I think that I think keeping Bernardeschi is not necessarily a bad idea. Consider last season at least he shown that he does still have the quality and he does care for this team. Now, obviously, last season he did had some ill disciplinary issue, but that of course could maybe be ironed out and he can still be a decent player. I can't say the same thing about Insigne. I think he's too far gone to a point where I don't think he's gonna ever play for this TFC team ever again, and especially in the beginning of the season, I would not be surprised he's gonna be in a holdout. So yeah, I do think that they have to exercise a buyout contract, most specifically on Insanity. If they don't do so, then clearly they are not making any progress of this deep rebuild that they're embarking heading into the season. The second big question is that can they at least still have a decent season with a bunch of misfit? And this is more on top about Robin Fraser. Can he do something similar to what John Herman do, which is a bunch of these guys that clearly are nowhere near to be good talent in MLS, but they punch above the weight and perform relatively well throughout the season and not finish dead last, as many people predict that this team is going to do. And then lastly, will they pay more attention to the youth academy, which could clearly be one of the best? I'm assuming that is going to be the case. They are started to really invest more on the youth academy front. At least the last couple of years, I think that when you look at this roster, there are some good young players out there that they can develop them correctly. They could definitely be not only a star in this league, but could be asset that they can sell off for a big amount of money and really start to get the train rolling in terms of rebuilding not only this team but also the youth academy as well. Expectation for this team is pretty much the same as last year. This is a team that is clearly circling the wagon right now of rebuild, and that the only way to show that progress of rebuild is to have last season where yes, it was kind of heartbreaking that they were in the playoff picture for pretty much most of the year and then just collapsed late in the season, but at least they show some progress and did not finish that last as everybody predicted them to do. So if they can show that progress and especially even develop some good young talent out of nowhere, then they definitely have shown some progress in this rebuild, and maybe this deep rebuild that they're encounter might not be as long as what I thought it was going to be. It's going to take at least 2 or 3 seasons, in my opinion, to really build this TFC side to be a contender. But until then, I mean, I'm sorry, TFC fan, but get used to the growing pains of this team, and maybe even and use this time at least in these next year or two to kind of reminisce on all of the great memories that they had a couple of years when this team was once a powerhouse in the Eastern Conference, and all the bad decision that they made a couple of years ago is kind of the reason why they're in the stage that they're currently in right now. But there you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at Toronto FC in the season preview. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this season preview, and if you're a TFC fan, what do you think is the strength, the weakness, the free big question, and the expectation is for this team heading into this season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.